I'm Rachel Holt for Nothing.com. Welcome to our Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm joined by Adam Rank of NFL Medium. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure is always on this side of the phone. And, oh, what a great week. I think we called it. Didn't we call Patriots blowout? Maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought that the Patriots were going to just crush that Texans team, and that's what happened.
You called it. I was a little skeptical. I'm not going to lie. So you get the credit.
It's revisionist history right now. We both called it. This podcast called it. I think and as the Patriots podcast of record, I think we can feel good about that.
All right. Well, I'll take the credit for that one as well. What do you think about the Buffalo Bills in Week 4? Any predictions?
You know what? I really just hope that they start Julian Edelman and to prove a point and just to go after it. I like it. I like that the Bills are coming off a win. I think that Rex Ryan is good for the NFL. Not necessarily a good coach, but I like him being in the spotlight. I like him being the guy who always wants to challenge Bill Belichick. I feel like if Rex went on to, Jeopardy and started popping off, like that would be enjoyable. He would be humiliated like he's probably going to be on Sunday, but it would be enjoyable. I would watch that for sure, but it'll be great. You know what? Can I give it – I don't mean to dive right into fantasy stuff, but here's my crazy thing for this week. And you tell me, Rachel.
Let's hear it.
If I'm out of line. Listen, there's a lot of narratives that we like to throw around and statistics and stuff that really have nothing to do with anything, but they're fun to talk about. They're talking points. And there's always the aspect of the revenge game, somebody going up against their former team and like, I'm going to show them. And I think that Chris Hogan this week is a perfect candidate for that, going up against his former team. You didn't want to pay the money for me? Well, I didn't sell out. I bought in, and I went over to the New England Patriots, and now I'm going to show you. And it seems like Belichick might be the kind of coach who gets mad enough at Rex Ryan to not only want to beat him, but to use his own former player to beat him. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm in a crazy, 16-team league or 14-team league or something like that, I'll do that. I'll pick up Chris Hogan just for the lark. And maybe even if I'm doing a little daily fantasy, I might do that as well. Am I crazy? Have I gone too far now?
No, but it scares me that you're trying to get in Bill Belichick's mind, which means you have a weird mind of your own. So the fact that you're even thinking of this plot, I agree with you after you said it. It makes a lot of sense. But
it does and it doesn't.
Thinking like Bill is just kind of twisted in its own way.
I have sleeveless sweatshirts though. Does that count? I think that's very comfortable. I'm like, I like what he's doing. You go to the gym, it's cold, somebody leaves with a fan on or something, you're like, I would like a sweatshirt, but I don't want my arms encumbered. And I'm like, Bill Belichick, genius once again. The sleeveless sweatshirt, it's amazing.
I have never once wished that only my arms were exposed and the rest of me was warm, but that's just me.
It's the same as fingerless gloves that make no sense.
All right, well, let's get into this because we could talk about Bill Belichick fashion all day. Here on the show, Fantasy and Friends on the NFL Network, which is very, very cool.
Oh, thank you.
You also grace the people of the fantasy football world, not only on this podcast, but with a lot of advice on Twitter, which you have a big following on. You're kind of a popular guy. But
that's very nice. It's very flattering that people follow me, and I'm amazed each and every day that these people you guys really care what I think, because a lot of times it's terrible jokes, but I'm happy to give fantasy advice when I can.
Right. Well, you have a lot of people asking you questions all the time. So my question for you is, what is the biggest question you're getting at this point from the people for Week 4?
I think we're starting to get into the bye weeks, and so that's always a question. It's not too severe this week because Aaron Rodgers is the lone quarterback who you are probably starting. I know Carson Wentz has played very well through the first 3 weeks of the season, but a lot of people aren't playing him in fantasy. So it's what do I do with Aaron Rodgers? Some people just don't think that far ahead, which is fine. I'm much the same way. The NFL season changes so much to be really too worried about your quarterback's bye weeks until it actually happens. I'll get there when I get there because who knows what is going to be going on. And so I think a lot of people are looking for that replacement. Joe Flacco seems to be the most popular name. Fun fact, when talking about statistics that don't matter, in the previous 3 births of his children. He's got 4. He's got kid number 4 who came this week. But in weeks when he's had a child, he's averaged 18 fantasy points, and that's just science. Like I can't refute that. And I think as somebody who has a young child, the first one's always the toughest. But once you have multiple, it's routine. It's like going to the doctor. It's like I know how this works now. So he's a hot name off the waiver wire. And then a lot of people, if you have Jameis Winston starting this week, that's another guy you might want to bench as well because he's going up against the Broncos, who have absolutely owned quarterbacks, and like good quarterbacks too, like Cam Newton and Tom Brady. Listen, I wouldn't say that they owned Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game. I think people are playing a little fast and loose. And if the Patriots had just kicked a couple of field goals in the fourth quarter, I think that game would have been a little bit different. But listen, that's starting to challenge Belichick again, and I don't want to be in that business.
No, you think just like him. You're on the same mind way. You can't challenge him. So as far as the quarterback, a guy like Trevor Siemian put up big points in week 3. Is he someone that you would have on your team for week 4?
He's somebody that I'm looking at. I think that you can kind of throw on the Buccaneers. Actually, it's a similar situation to what they had last week when the Buccaneers played host to the Rams, where they didn't really have a strong quarterback. Case Keenum's not somebody who really scares people, and the Buccaneers like to play that funnel defense, which is really going to go and shut down the run. So it really made the Rams have to throw the ball down the field, and Keenum got lucky a couple of times. There was a kind of a blown coverage on Brian Quick's touchdown. Tavon Austin made a pretty good move on a defender, made him miss, scored a touchdown, and that, of course, opened things up for Todd Gurley because the game script changes and allowed him to have a big game. So that was helpful, and I think the Broncos are going to be in a similar situation where they're going to try to shut down C.J. Anderson, and they're going to allow Trevor Siemian to once again throw the ball down the field. And I think we even talked about it on this podcast last week, is that Trevor Siemian just had not attempted long passes, and when he did in the first 2 games of the season, he threw an interception and he threw an incompletion. But last week, when they tried to stretch the field against the Broncos, he was 10 for 10. You saw Demaryius Thomas and Manny Sanders both go out and have good games. So I think the Buccaneers are going to have to try to do that again. They probably want to make Siemian prove it one more time that you can do it. So I think he's going to get his opportunities. I don't think it's a terrible matchup play. I would lean Joe Flacco, but I think Trevor Siemian, again, if somebody, because like a lot of people might be in this position of picking up a quarterback, but I think Trevor Siemian would probably be my number 2 waiver wire stream.
Okay, I have to ask you about the running backs next because they're driving us all crazy. They're getting injured. They're not being productive. As far as some guys you're looking at to have a great week 4, who are some names?
Well, Dwayne Washington is gaining more and more trust with the coaching staff in Washington. And I know if you watched it last week or watched their game against Green Bay, you probably didn't come away super impressed, kind of like if you were going to introduce somebody to Star Wars and you started with Episode 1, Phantom Menace. And I got to make sure that everybody understands me. Episode 1 is Phantom Menace. New Hope, the original Star Wars. That's Episode 4. So stick with me, nerds. But it wasn't impressive. But the one thing is that Detroit fell behind so quickly that they had to throw the ball, which is why Marvin Jones went out there and had an absolutely bonkers day. But this week, the Lions have the Bears, which means the Lions could be up in the second half, which means there'll be a lot more running, a lot more opportunities to really show off what he can do. Listen, I watched this guy play at the University of Washington. He is a very good running back. He was somebody that we had our eye on. I remember when we were doing our little sleeper summit during the summer, he was somebody I was really pounding the table for. Like, this guy can get an opportunity. He just had to get past Amir Abdullah, who's had fumbling and injury issues, and we've seen it already happen now. Here he is in week 4. I think this is a great start for him. Jordan Howard's on the other side of the ball playing for the Bears, getting an opportunity. The matchup's fine. The Lions haven't allowed a rushing touchdown this season, but they have allowed a lot of yards. And really right now you want volume more than you want anything else. And you know that Jordan Howard is not going to be competing for time with Kadeem Carey's out. Jeremy Langford's out. They signed Joyke Bell this week. And I know revenge game, but you know what? I'm not buying it. They're going to give Jordan Howard an opportunity. Another interesting one, too. I think the other – and I'll try to be quick. I don't want to waste everybody's time. But two other running backs. You talk about people hitting me up on Twitter. The biggest questions – actually, there's three guys. And let's just blow through these real quick. D'Angelo Williams, I think that you still have to start him. I think the Steelers are going to be more creative with Lev Bell returning this time around. I think we could see him play in the slot a lot more. He's their second-best receiver now. That Martavis Bryant, of course, is out for the season. So I think they're going to get creative with it. So I think both those guys are viable options. And, of course, if you have Lev Bell, you're playing him no matter what. Spencer Ware might be a concern for people also on Sunday night. But I don't really feel that way. He's got a great role with this team. He was going to be their third down back. He was going to be their goal line short yardage back. He's been too effective so far this season. He gives you a nice safe floor because he's a good receiver out of the backfield. So I would feel comfortable playing against him. I don't think that Steelers defense will be as awful as they were against Philadelphia, but still there'll be some opportunities there for him.
Can I just add that you're the guy that told us about Spencer Ware before it all happened in week one. And he had that breakout week one. I mean, I'm not trying to blame you for week 2 and week 3, but it's so we can start him still?
I would think so. We're the Spencer Ware show of record. And Spencer Ware had a not a great point total this week, but part of the reason was because my guy, Bill Vinovich, the referee, they overturned his touchdown, which was questionable. I mean, like, I kind of see where you guys were going, but it didn't seem definitive. It seemed like he kind of bobbled it, but recaptured it, but then hit. I'm like, I hate the rules. Like, look, I think as a fan sitting at home watching, we just want to see touchdowns. Like, don't spend 30 minutes trying to figure this out. Like, the guy on the field called it a touchdown. Just roll with it. You're fine. But the thing is, so that was an 8-point swing because we lost the touchdown. We lost 2 points for a fumble loss. So it wasn't as great, but you know what? Again, we're looking at the opportunities, and those week-to-week variances will happen, but over the course of an entire season, over the long run, Spencer Ware is going to end up being very good for us. And it also reminds me of Chuck Sims, who will be running for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. A lot of people are going to be avoiding him because of that stout Broncos defense, but they harangue quarterbacks. They're like 22nd in the league against the run. Statistically, they've allowed, like the 8th most points to fantasy running back. They really don't shut down fantasy running backs. And again, Chuck Sims is sitting there getting all the carries. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's going to give you a safe floor. He's going to get double digits, and people are going to be bummed out if they sit him.
Okay, these are some good names to start. But as far as guys who you would sit, who are some guys that have a tough matchup in week 4 and you would recommend keeping on the bench?
It gets tougher and tougher to try to identify running backs to sit because it's, a lot of people don't have great options. But I do think that in the Vikings game, both those running backs really haven't emerged as a viable option. They split time. Asiata is the short back. McKinnon's the third down guy, the long yardage situations, but neither one of them have been able to do much of anything. I think, as a matter of fact, the Vikings they rank last in rushing. They don't score fantasy points. They're going up against the Giants, who are actually pretty good on defense. They've been a sneaky good defense, and if you're looking for a defense to stream and you miss out on whoever's playing the Browns, that's Washington. If you miss out on them, you can go ahead and pick up the Giants. I think that's a good one because they don't move the ball very much. They're not going to score a lot of points. They're not going to get a lot of yards. So I would look at the Vikings running backs. I would pass on them. I've been down on Melvin Gordon every week, and that he always comes through. So as a service to people who are, starting Melvin Gordon, I'm here to dump on him again and be like, don't start him. But that's a nod to you guys because I don't want to be the one who breaks the streak,
Right.
And who's really starting to concern me, Rachel?
Who's that?
Carson Palmer.
Okay.
Like he doesn't look good, and I have him on one team. I have him on one of my best teams, and one of the leagues. So I have 2 leagues that I care about the most. Or really care about. And I'm like, why do I have Carson Palmer? I'm like trying to remember the circumstances that led me to have Carson Palmer because I love Matthew Stafford more. I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, it's so funny to like go back and like, how did I end up with that guy? Maybe I was trying something new. I don't know. And this isn't really just an overreaction to the game that he had against Buffalo in Week 3, but the last couple of weeks, just this whole season, I've just been like, I'm not really buying Carson Palmer. Maybe it is recency bias because of how poorly he played against Carolina in the NFC Championship game, but you're like, I'm not feeling it. I'm looking at other options. In that league I mentioned, I had an opportunity to try to grab Stafford off the waiver wire because I play with some dum-dums, so they're not quite – but I'm the dum-dum for not picking him up sooner. But, you know, I had a choice between picking up him or Jordan Howard, and I put my first waiver claim in on Howard. And you know what? I made that decision. I'm going to have to live with it. But I'm looking at other options, and I'm starting to explore trades and trying to figure out a way to get a better quarterback upgrade. And I think anybody who has Carson Palmer should probably be doing the same thing. I don't like to advocate carrying two quarterbacks, but it's time to kind of look around and see if somebody has a spare quarterback I can grab or anything like that. So he's somebody to investigate.
Okay, let's go off of this because obviously when you're adding these new guys to the roster, you have to make some cuts, you have to make some big decisions. So I recently cut Jeremy Langford from my team. I didn't want him anymore. He's not doing too much. And then, of course, he's hurt. I know you're a Bears fan, so I don't know if this makes you feel a certain way. I'm sorry, but is there any guy...
You can't see me, but I'm livid right now. I cut Langford a week ago. I'm with you. I made the same move. I'm following your lead. Right.
I know. A lot of people do. But is there any guy like Langford that you would suggest just getting rid of at this point who we thought was going to be great, but not so much through 3 weeks?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. I think Golden Tate might be one that a lot of people have on their roster. We weren't big on you and me. We were not big on Golden Tate. We tried to warn people. I know, like, everybody got into the thing, like, look at his numbers when Calvin Johnson wasn't there. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. He's not a number one receiver, no matter what you want to say. And we knew Marvin Jones was going to be better, and it's played out that way. And Stafford targets him all the time. He only goes after Marvin Jones Jr., Eric Ebron, and sometimes he throws the ball to Theo Riddick. Like, Golden Tate is way down the list. So if you need a spot and if you're in a pinch and you need to drop somebody, I think Golden Tate, it's time to break up with him. Jeremy Langford, who you mentioned. I had Rashad Jennings on a bunch of teams. I'm a dum-dum. I bought into that one. I'm like, because I like to do – I'm not a strict zero RB theory person. It's kind of like when somebody's like, I'm not vegetarian, I just don't eat a lot of beef. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't avoid it altogether. I don't want to tell anybody that I'm vegetarian or anything, but I just don't eat it a lot. So I'm the same way with the running backs, but I thought that, Rashad Jennings was a good risk late in drafts, and I was wrong, and I'll admit that. Sometimes it happens, and I bought into his finish the last season, and it really was just more of a mirage than anything else. And actually, if you wanted to go grab Paul Perkins instead, because he's probably going to be the guy who will be carrying them through the rest of the season. At some point, he's going to get an opportunity. He's more of a stash. So you can let him go. Actually, here's another thing, too. If you have Rashad Jennings, this is who you should do right now. Go, everybody at home, wherever you are, if you're driving, pull over, whatever you got to do, go check it right now. See if Kenny Dixon, the running back for the Baltimore Ravens, he returned to practice this week. He's not going to play in Week 4, but that's okay. He is going to be the guy who eventually wins the job in Baltimore. They really don't like the running back situation that they got going on there. They don't believe in Justin Forsett. He was more Gary Kubiak's guy. So they don't believe in him. They don't believe in Terrence West. I think they really want Kenny Dixon to be the guy, and they're going to give him every chance when he returns. So drop Rashad Jennings or Golden Tate or Jeremy Langford or any of those guys. Move on from them. Go pick up Kenny Dixon. If he's gone, try Paul Perkins, and see what happens.
What do we do about a guy like Brandon Marshall with the Jets? He really hasn't done much. He actually joked at his locker room that he's not a good start to the season to have him on your fantasy team. So it's just a dagger to the heart of anyone who does have him. And, of course, he's dealing with a quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who can't seem to get him the ball. He had 6 interceptions in last week's loss. What do people do with a guy like Brandon Marshall?
Well, the good news is that he had 16 targets, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was willing to throw the game away to force the ball into him, which, as a fantasy enthusiast, I like. I can understand if Jets fans, all 6 of them, if they're upset by that news, that's fine. I don't care. So, but that's the thing is, like, this week it's a better matchup. He's going to go up. It's not a better. It's still a tough matchup, like obviously going up against Seattle. But he's going to go after him again, and if he throws 4 picks, like, listen, I'm not starting Fitzpatrick, so I don't really care. But he's going to try to get the ball to Brandon Marshall. And honestly, a couple of those throws, they made good plays on him. Like, they could have been thrown better, no doubt. But part of that is that he held out for so long. It's taking him a little bit of time to get established and get his rhythm back. But I think that he's going to take his chances. And so I like Brandon Marshall. Listen, all you got to do is hit on one of those targets in the end zone. He is the most targeted guy for them in the red zone. So as long as he makes good on one of those, then we're smiling. I mean, if one of those brutal interceptions in the end zone had just been caught, then again, you're talking about a 6 to 10 point, or 6, I'm trying to think how many yards it would have been. Let's say roughly, conservatively, an 8-point swing. And if you add 8 points to what Brandon Marshall did last week, you're feeling pretty good. So you take those bad weeks, understand this is what happens in fantasy football. Hopefully he's not your wide receiver 1. He's, either your wide receiver 2 or your flex guy. And you can kind of live with that stuff.
Okay, and you touched on the matchup. Let's get into the Survivor League. This is my favorite part of our little podcast, besides just talking to you in general. But I love the Survivor League because it's been difficult for us. And last week, a lot of people picked the Miami Dolphins against the Cleveland Browns and just narrowly escaped elimination. So this week, a lot of people are still targeting the teams that play the Browns. And I don't know. I'm skeptical of this. Is this something that you would recommend?
Here's the thing. Narrowly escaped danger. I don't know, because on the show, I actually changed mine because everybody was going Dolphins. So I'm like, I don't want to be like everybody else. And let's be honest, there's no money on it, so what do I care? So I switched it to the Bucks because I thought it was going to be a difficult matchup for LA. But all right, so I'm out in that league. But I still think that going after the Browns is a pretty viable option. The one thing I do like about Washington this week, even though they're coming off a big win and beating the Giants is huge for them, I still say that Kirk Cousins is one of the better all-good, like, terrible matchup exploiter quarterback guy. Like, when he goes up against bad teams, like, he's Joe Montana all of a sudden. Like, he is so good. And you're like, this guy's amazing. And then he goes up against a credible NFL team, and you're like, meh. This is why he was drafted in the 4th round. So I feel like he sees the Browns and he's like, yeah, this is it. I'm going to go put up Madden numbers and have myself a day, and everybody's going to go out there and have a good time. And plus, they see the film against Miami. They know, like, okay, this team's legitimate enough that we can't just sleepwalk our way through this. And so I feel more comfortable this week. I'm glad that they had a scare, because when you really should get nervous is when Miami's getting blown, when Cleveland's getting blown out week after week after week after week. Then you've got to be like, oh, great, because they're professionals, they're men, they're going to come through at some point. But
right.
I think that they had a close one. I think we're safe with Washington. That would probably be. I know it's a cheap way to go, and I'm looking at some of the other matchups, and I'm like, do I want to go here? And I'm like, I just like that one the best. And you're not going to pick Washington again, so why not go with them here?
Right. Well, maybe you'll just serve as an example to us people that are still left in our Survivor League what happens when you try to get cute with it. So
way to rub that in.
I know. I'm sorry, but
it makes you feel alive, doesn't it?
It does. Week 4, I'm feeling great about myself.
What about you? What about your teams, though? I feel like I talk way too much, and I think people are probably like, Rank, shut up. We want to hear about Rachel's team. What's going on? What's going on with your teams? How is everything going with you fantasy-wise?
So the worst decision I made this week in my league of records, as you say, the one I care the most about, I had a 2-point loss. And what I did is I picked up the Miami Dolphins defense, and I benched the Patriots defense because, of course, the Dolphins are playing the Browns. The Patriots, of course, went in there, and they crushed Houston, got huge points, The Dolphins didn't do as much, so that was my one thing of the week that I'm still going to think about for a while. It lingers. Big loss for me this week in that league.
That's a tough one. It's tough when you, and especially if you're playing the Patriots every week, who are usually pretty good, that you went to the street. But again, like the science of it says, the Miami Dolphins should be able to get you some points. Like you're doing the statistically right thing.
Right.
If that makes sense. It's like,
right.
The odds will, like, ultimately you'll win that in the long run. It's like going to the craps table and somebody's betting boxcars, and you're like, yeah, there's going to be that one time where they hit, the double sixes and be like, see, I told you. But you're like, yeah, you're going to lose 29 other times, statistically speaking.
Maybe I can write this train again. Who is the defense that you would pick up this week?
Well, if you're listening quick enough, Cincinnati. I shouldn't even say that because, like, if it ends up blowing up and somebody's listening to this on Friday, they're like, I never said that. I could go into full presidential mode. Like, I never said that. Prove to me that I said that. Actually, it doesn't matter because I can now claim that things that I say actually weren't said. So it's a new world now, so I can get away with that. But if you miss out on that, and I understand, and it's tough. I understand where you're coming from as well when you're benching a Thursday night defense, because if you get a 0, and that's happened to me, because it happened in either week 1 or 2, where you get a 0 and it's like you're just looking at it for 3 days like, oh, great, well, there's points I'm not going to be getting this week because I blew it. So I understand all that stuff. But I think we mentioned the Giants earlier. They're a good option. Washington, again, just streaming against the Browns is going to be a good one. But I'm really getting geared up for the Giants. I kind of like that they lost to Washington, and I know this isn't scientific. I do like that they lost to Washington, so they have some sort of incentive. The Vikings are coming off of a huge win, and even though the Giants are going on the road, I think that it's Sam Bradford, so they're ripe for turnovers right there. And the running game just can't get going, and they've had some injuries on the offensive line, so I think the Giants would be a pretty good one. So the Giants and Washington would be, and along with Cincinnati, would be my 3 leaders in the clubhouse. Or if you want a real sneaky one too, you could try Detroit. Brian Hoyer is the quarterback. I know they're going to be going to a rookie running back who we talked about him earlier, who a lot of people are high on. But the Bears have lost 6 in a row. Is it 6 or 7 in a row to the Lions? That could be a tough one. I'm going to say that as an unbiased person. Try to take it, try to take off my blue and orange glasses and give you the straight dope. So that's a pretty nice one too. But I have too many Lions on all my teams, so I got to be careful not to be so Detroit centric.
Okay, well, this is all great advice, and I like the idea that I get to take credit for this next week when we're talking about all the successful predictions you had. So let's keep this going.
Oh yeah.
My last question for you is, when can we watch Fantasy and Friends on the NFL Network?
Well, that's so nice of you to ask. We will be on the air Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, which, of course, is your time if you are out there on the East Coast. We got a cool show coming up. Again, it's a fun concept. We take a lot of calls. We try to get it interactive with these people as much as possible. We have Skypers. Sometimes we have celebrities drop by. We've had Michael Rappaport. Anybody who's a Howard Stern. Actually, if you're a fan of television, movies, or Howard Stern, you know who Michael Rappaport is. He's a lot of fun. We had Kevin from The Office earlier this week. You never know who's gonna drop by. It's a fun concept. So we're having a good time with that. So I'd appreciate anybody if you somewhat enjoy what's going on with us here. Please check out the show. Just DVR it, watch it once. If you don't like it, we'll shake hands. We'll be friends. And if not, you might enjoy it. Like MJD's a riot. Dave Damashek, very funny young man, and Erin Coscarelli. She's bringing it too. She's beaten all 3 of us. She's a sneaky fantasy maven. I think she was kind of sandbagging it for a couple of weeks. We're like, oh, she's pretty shrewd. So it's a cool show, and it's a good time, and I hope people can check it out.
Thank you so much, Adam.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel.